In this video, we're going to cover how to make a sewn down collar, a doubled collar. There are many ways that people do this. My approach is to make something that is still very flexible. I don't particularly like a picked up and bound off edge on the inside in here because despite the fact that we want some structure at the neckline, I don't want total inflexibility, which is what you get with a bind off, unfortunately. So this is the method I prefer, and it comes from this wonderful book, The Big Book of Knitting by Katarina Boos, which is full of amazing and wonderful techniques. I highly recommend looking it up and getting yourself a copy. But that's where I first saw this technique, and it makes a lot of sense. So what you need in order to do this is to have knit your collar to double the length that you want, and you'll still be on a round needle in this case. This is a circular knit collar. And then you need a tapestry needle or large yarn needle, some pins of some sort. I like to use these little stitch markers as pins. A toothy yarn for holding stitches. I'll explain that in a moment. So something with a bit of grab to it, and something smoother, a bit more slippery. In this case, this is what I'm going to use to demonstrate this method for sewing down the stitches. You might use your own the same yarn that you used for the project. The advantage of doing it this way is if you use a slippery yarn like this is that if you need to change anything, you can take it back out. You can always stitch over it with the main yarn after the fact, which is in fact what I did with this one. I did this one with a temporary yarn first that was extremely slippery, a silk-based yarn, then stitched in with the main yarn and then pulled out the silk, because I was demonstrating it. But it's entirely up to you how you prefer to proceed. You can also simply leave in the contrast color yarn and have a lovely little detail in there. That's up to you. So let's begin. This is the finished example. This is my in progress sample here. This is my Freya sweater. So I have knit the collar to twice the length that I want. And then what I did was I took the toothy yarn and I simply broke the main yarn, leaving a tail as always. And then I joined in the contrasting yarn and I knit one round, and then I turned the work and knit back flat. You can do this in the round. It just means cutting tails, and it's a slightly more complicated way to explain it, so I'm going to show it to you this way. It just means essentially knit 2 flat rows of knitting. In pattern is best. So this is a 2x2 rib, so I worked it in pattern. And then you will have left a tail at the beginning of that where you joined. Let me turn to the back. Where you started, always leave a tail, and then where you finished, also leave a tail. I have put my needle on hold. I've put these on stoppers now. It's up to you what you have to use, but at this point we're going to actually remove the needle. This is the advantage of this method, is that these 2 rows of toothy yarn hold the stitches in place while keeping this extremely flexible, which is what we need in order to pin it into place exactly as we want it to be. And so we can actually remove this needle without fear of too many repercussions. You should still always, of course, be careful, but I'm going to just slip this out. And let me show you where the tails are as well. Okay, so here is at the beginning of the round, my 2 tails. So now I can push this collar down into the inside and pin it in place. And this is very casual pinning. We're just giving it a general shape because luckily this method is both flexible and stable. It's going to pretty much end up where you want it to go anyway. So I'm looking for the inner pickup line here. And I'm going to pin further up so that it's not in the way of me removing stitches. So I'm just going to place a pin, say here. I like to work by bisecting the piece, so I started at the center back. I'm now going to go to the center front. You might want to start with the center front because obviously that's the most important place, but again, this is very flexible, so you really don't have to worry very much. So it's about there. Then I'm going to go to the halfway points between those two markers. And this is what I love about it. It's still so supple. It moves where you want it to go, but it's also, you have insurance. It's not going to budge too much. And then one more on the opposite side. And it's up to you how many you want to put in. Whatever makes you feel secure is perfectly fine. I think 4 is probably enough for me, but why don't we do a few more just in case, at least when we're getting started. And we're going to be working, as you might expect, we're going to be pulling out this waste yarn, going in this direction, working from right to left. And as we do that, it's going to expose the live stitches here. And this is what another boon of this method is, that you don't have bound off stitches, you have live stitches. So they're incredibly flexible and they actually basically melt into the fabric. You're not going to see them. So you will get some structure and some flexibility, and it's a very clean looking finish because you really won't see much of what's going on there. So I have that. I'll just put another here. And that should give us enough to start. So now I want to use my yarn needle and my flexible, smooth contrast yarn. And it's up to you how you want to work. In some ways it might be easier to just flip this whole thing inside out from the beginning. That's fine. Whatever you'd like to do is fine. Here's my tails. There's of course a few other tails in the way, so let's get those out of the way. Okay, so because I knit those rows flat, the contrast yarn, these tails are going to easily come out because I have two ends of yarn here and I can pull on both of them. The method I use for sewing this is actually sort of a whip stitch. I'm just going to go from the edge of the existing sweater neckline through one of these exposed stitches. Let me turn it actually this way. That might be easier for you to see. And it's really, there's not a lot of science to this. Do what works for you. It will be stable. So I'm going to pull on a tail. There's my stitch. Your double insurance policy here is to just place your thumb gently behind that stitch. It's really not going to go anywhere. And this is 100%, sorry, this is mostly alpaca, this yarn. So if it wanted to go somewhere, this is the yarn that would show you, but it's still pretty stable. So here we go. We're going to sew through this neckline with our contrast yarn and then just go through that open stitch. I'm going to expose the next stitch by pulling on my tails, 1, 2. And it's up to you how you like to work here, but I'm going to do an overhand motion again, always beginning at the same spot. Begin on the neckline side of the sweater, going through that stitch, the next stitch. Pull on your tails from the neckline side through the stitch. And so you see what you're getting there is essentially a overhand whip stitch, I think. So for all the types of sewing down knits there are out there, this is really very anxiety-free. It's very stable. And this also allows you to easily try it on again and reverse your work if you need to. And you can see it's obviously visible in the contrast yarn, but if you were using the same yarn, it really would not be very visible. And then what I have there is still a really good amount of stretch. From the outside, do you see anything? You do not. And you have lovely stretch there, but also structure and stability. So this is all there is to it. You would work all the way around until all of your held stitches have been sewn down, and then just fasten off your yarn. That's all there is to it. And then, as I said, if you want to stitch over this, you can. If you want to stitch over it and then remove this, you can. It's entirely up to you. This is a good place to use something like, actually, sometimes I use embroidery thread or silk floss, something like that you might find at a needlepoint store. That can be really handy for this kind of thing. But that's how you do it. And then the beautiful result, as you saw before, is this flexible but sturdy edge. Okay, I hope this helps. Enjoy.